Welcome to Finance with Factor,
Oops, apparently we're already recording, so here we go.
a place you can come to laugh and learn from local experts who love to discuss everything related to the world of real estate.
Weird passion. It's one that I actually share a little bit, so it makes me a weirdo with you.
Each week, we'll cover a unique topic
Let's talk about condos.
to help you understand the mortgage industry, navigate the home buying process, and grow your business while maintaining a slice of sanity.
Okay, fine. I've been confused by a lot of things over the past few years.
Now that he's climbed safely atop his soapbox, here's your host, Jason Factor.
It's rare to have repeat guests on this, but the reason we're doing it is because Harlan is well adversed in a topic that I really want to get into, which is what the heck is going on out there. This has been a crazy market. He is joining us today with some expertise on financial. I can't really call it financial planning, but that's really what we're going to talk about today is the value of bringing your equity and your housing wealth into the larger conversation that is a financial plan for a customer. So welcome back.
Good to be here, Jason. Important subject, something that is really a big deal and a huge concern of mine because I think there's a ton of clients that are underserved because we don't band together to help those clients. I come from a medical town in Wisconsin. We had a big Marshfield clinic in Wisconsin, and there's 800 specialists that worked at that clinic. And fortunately, I did not have to go in there because I wasn't sick, but I knew a lot of people that did, and they had all kinds of specialists on everything imaginable, on very narrow specialties. Sometimes 4 or 5 doctors might work on the same person. It was a regional center that a lot of difficult cases were flown in. But what was interesting is, and I did loans for a lot of those doctors, and what's interesting is they all talk to each other. If they're working on a patient, if maybe the cancer doctor was talking to the heart doctor, or the heart doctor was talking to the ear, eye, nose, and throat guy, or whatever, and they always compared notes and medications and everything else. Quite frankly, if they didn't, that would be called malpractice.
Yeah.
But it occurred to me in the financial world, the financial advisor does his or her thing. The realtor does his or her thing. Loan officers do our thing. And then the tax guy does another thing in April. And they never talk to each other. Isn't that malpractice?
It's funny because in the medical world, you would call them comorbidities, right? So you have multiple things going on and they all need to be addressed in synchronicity so that you understand how they interact with each other and you don't impact one comorbidity while trying to fix the other. And in many ways, that's exactly what we talk about in the financial world is you have these little silos and they tend to work in their little silos. But I am a big advocate that everything needs to happen in concert. One of my favorite pieces of advice from some of the conversations we've had, Harlan, is I was making the mistake. I said, I always ask, do you work with a financial advisor? I wasn't doing the next question, which isn't just, do you like them? It was, what's their information? Because once I can capture their contact information, now I can follow up and say, hey, did you know that Harlan and Jason are buying a home? And here's what they're looking to spend per month. I just wanted to run that through you, make sure that was part of your plan and your conversation. I was shocked that I hadn't thought to do that. And that was, that was something you brought up in one of these workshops.
Well, I kind of stumbled on it by accident, but it was bugging me because I would call financial advisors and they wouldn't return my calls. And they didn't think I was important. Well, when I called them and said, hey, I'm doing a loan for Bill and Sue and I don't want to screw up their financial plan, so I'd like to talk to you about this.
And so today, the reason that I wanted to kind of bring in Harlan, today's conversation is not just a reverse mortgage conversation. It is not just a forward mortgage conversation. This is a conversation about zooming out for our clients, whether you're an advisor, a realtor, a CPA, or a lender, to have a more holistic view on your customers' financial well-being. The reason I think that this is so important right now is because we're seeing such a volatile market. You have housing prices that are continually going up, rates that are up and down, and you have stocks and bonds and stock markets that are going up and down. It just makes for a very uncertain marketplace. Harlan, what is your view on how, when you work with clients, how you try to bring in that holistic approach.
Well, we always, I mentioned in a previous recording that when you look at everybody's wealth, everybody has three buckets of wealth who has a home. And bucket one is, of course, their bucket, their ability to make money. And bucket two is the financial planner's bucket. And bucket three is the house, which is also an investment. And everything that's done in any of these buckets affects the other bucket. They're all connected. So whatever we do in the real estate bucket is going to affect what the financial advisor can do or should do in bucket two in the investment side. How big our down payment is, how big of a house we buy, how long we plan on being in the house. All of those things dramatically affect our investing on the other side. Things that I did in my 40s have a direct, and how I bought a house and what house I bought, just like any of my clients, has a direct effect of what's going on in my retirement planning. So it is critical that all of those things are meshed together because you can't look at them in isolation. It is connected together, and how I finance a property and when I refinance, or whether or not I buy an investment property or a second home, is directly related to what kind of retirement I'm going to have. And I'm a big fan of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. And every decision that you make, whether you're 30 or whether you're 50, should be made on what is this going to do to my retirement? Because otherwise you're not going to have a retirement, as you said.
Or whatever your end goal is, right? If the end goal is funding your kid's college education, if your end goal is retiring at the age of 45, if your goal is your goal is working until you expire in the field with your kids, like whatever it is, I want to make sure that we and technically we're not, but as fiduciaries, which we should be, working in your best interest. And it's a conversation that I have with every one of my clients, even our first-time homebuyers. One of the very first questions I ask, I think it is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of homebuyers make. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of homebuyers make is they go in and they say, how much can I afford? And they say, great, pre-approved for X, here's my rubber stamp, let me go shopping. The biggest mistake that the lender makes in that conversation is they never ask, how long do you see yourself in this home? If you plan to be here for X number of years, what's your plan after that? Do you plan to sell it and use that down payment for the next house? Do you plan to hold it as a rental? Because how you answer that question can impact the way we want to finance this. Are we doing I'll give you a quick example. When we bought the house before we live in now, we knew that we had an expiration date on that home of within 5 years. So it didn't scare us to do a short-term adjustable on that. The goal was minimize our down payment at the lowest balanced monthly payment that we could afford because money was very tight. And we also knew that we needed to maintain as much liquidity as possible for that next purchase because that next purchase was going to be 3 to 5 years. That's a very different financing strategy than when we got into this house where this was our quote unquote forever home. We'll be here for 20, 30 years. So the way we finance those two investments is very different. In the same way that the way you invest in penny stocks is very different than the way you invest in your 401k.
But that's so true. And if you look short term, you are not going to get good results in the long term because you're not considering beginning with the end in mind. And that is why it's so important that real estate agents, loan officers, and financial advisors work together. I'm surprised that a lot of realtors and a lot of loan officers never ask somebody, do you have a financial advisor? It'd be kind of like, do you have a primary care physician? If they didn't ask that, that would be a problem. So that's really what this is all about, because what you just went through is a perfect example of why we need to be working together with the advisor. And quite frankly, the advisor needs to work with us. It's amazing the number of advisors that I talk to, and I talk to advisors almost every day. I had 5 advisor calls yesterday on Zoom calls working with case studies on clients. And it's amazing how many of them have never asked the client, when do you plan on moving? Have you ever thought about moving? Are you paying extra on your mortgage? They don't even, in most of their fact finders, they don't even have a spot to fill out the information on the mortgage. And we actually give them an addendum to their fact finder that has all the housing questions in, which is 2 pages. They barely have 1 page. Maybe they have, what's the value of your house and how much do you owe? And that calculates their net worth. So this is on both ends, there has to be more communication for the benefit of the patient, which we call clients.
Yeah. And I've sat in on, so Harlan and I have been teaming up a little bit, trying to get in some financial advisors' offices for various presentations. And I've been listening in on the ones that you've been doing at various offices for advisors as well, just to pick your brain and learn. I'd be curious, beyond the sheet that you just mentioned, what are some of the other topics or, I guess, gaps that you find yourself filling and talking to advisors about when we're going in for these presentations?
Well, the biggest single thing is cash flow. Advisors often look at assets under management. This client has $1 million, or they have 500,000, or they got 3 million, or whatever the number is. And they look at their net worth and what their investable assets are, which is, of course, what they should do. But the biggest single thing, whether somebody is 30 or whether they're 80, is to look at the cash flow, because cash flow is, I asked a nurse once, kind of staying with the medical example, how long can a super healthy person go without oxygen? Well, the answer is 7 minutes. I said, what if they're an athlete? What if they're really strong and tough? 7 minutes. So money isn't everything. Cash flow isn't everything, but it's reasonably close to oxygen. And it doesn't matter how much you're worth. It doesn't matter what your assets are on the balance sheet if you don't have cash flow to pay your bills and to maintain your lifestyle. And the biggest gap that I see is when an advisor is looking at things. In fact, even clients that say, how much money do I need to retire? Well, 1.2 million would be good. Well, maybe you need 5 million. Maybe you only need 500,000. What's the cash flow needs? What is your expenses and what's coming in on Social Security and pensions or whatever when it comes to retirement? The same thing as a 30-year-old. How much money are you putting out for the house payment and for all of your expenses, and how much do you have left to save? Is your savings goal of $1,200 a month or whatever the number is that feasible based on what you're doing with your housing plan? So cash flow is so much overlooked on both sides of the equation. I mean, yeah, and that people always say, what's the monthly payment? What's the monthly payment? Most people don't even remember their interest rate, even though they're all hung up on it in the beginning. They just know that their house payment is $2,200 a month. And so that is part of the equation, but it has to be looked at. How does that affect my other cash flow? What about the taxes? What about the insurance? What about the maintenance? So you get a great deal on a house, but the maintenance is $500 a month. Well, that wasn't really helpful in where the planning was. So short answer, the cash flow is often overlooked, and it's important at any stage of life as to how much we have left to save when we're younger. And then once we get to the retirement years, okay, now how much do I really need to maintain my lifestyle and have a great retirement?
Well, and then cash flow gets balanced with, you've used the word investment a few times. Cash flow gets balanced with opportunity costs.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about some of the conversations that we have with advisors when it comes to where does that down payment come from? Where does that cash flow come from? Not only while in your wealth accumulation stage, but in retirement. All of that opportunity costs of bucket 2 versus bucket 3. How do we balance that when working in concert?
Well, there's an overwhelming desire to be debt-free, to get rid of debt in this country, partially because of what we were brought up on, especially my generation, with Depression-era parents or grandparents. And so there's so many people that fear debt and want to get rid of it as soon as possible. If that's the case, then everybody should save a bunch of money and never buy a house until you have enough cash to pay cash for it. Which means nobody would buy houses, because by the time you saved enough money, the value of the house went up, and now you got to keep saving more money, and pretty soon you're 80 and you haven't bought a house yet. So we know that financing using leverage makes sense to build wealth. We know that even Apple Computer borrows money, and they've got all kinds of cash, and they issue bonds. So because debt is a tool and it's a lever, and it has to be handled safely. Of course, people use debt incorrectly, especially when it comes to credit cards, and they pay 30% interest on buying a $80 meal.
So hopefully not the clients of you, Mr. or Mrs. Financial Advisor.
Yes, certainly. I mean, we all make foolish decisions sometimes, and debt can be a big problem. In fact, one of the chapters of my book is written on sex, drugs, and reverse mortgages. And People say, that's weird. Well, sex can be good or evil. Drugs can be good or evil. And so can debt. So can reverse mortgages, forward mortgages, credit cards, whatever. So certainly that's a concern. But when it comes to cash flow, if I can leverage to be able to afford to purchase $1 million house, because that is what my goal is, whether it's a $400,000 house or a $2 million house, whatever the situation is, if I figure out how that fits into my cash flow and have more money in bucket 2 into my investment bucket, I don't care if I have to pay PMI. I don't care what my interest rate is. That's important. I need to know what it is, but that's not the important thing.
It becomes a math problem.
Without question. I mean, I tell people all the time when they say interest rates are high, I said, well, I bought my first house at 16% in 1981. If I wouldn't have done that and I would have waited for interest rates to go down to the single digits, I would have waited 10 years before interest rates went to 9.9% in 1991. So the issue is if we use debt for the leverage and we keep more money in our investment bucket as we're growing, I made the decision back when I was in my 40s and I understood the concept of reverse mortgages and 30-year mortgages and leveraging and tax deductions and so on. I made the decision never to pay off my house so I could have more money in my investment bucket. Yet there's a lot of realtors that will encourage people to pay cash for a house because it might be an easier transaction. But if the realtor was really working together with a financial advisor, they would say, well, no, it makes more sense to leverage this and keep that $800,000 in assets under management because you can make more money on that than you can on what you're going to lose in interest.
And it's a conversation that, again, you should be having, if you're a home buyer, you should be having with your whole financial wellness team. The whole doctor's office needs to be there. Your realtor, your mortgage lender, your advisor. If you don't have one, ask your mortgage lender. They work with a lot of them, or they should, especially if they listen to this podcast. They will learn how to work with more of them. But I'll give you a quick story with my own parents. My own parents, when they were buying their house, they were going to make a large down payment. It was fine. Rates happened to be, now everyone cover your ears for a second, so this gets bleeped out, but 2.75%. So we were looking at that, and my dad said, well, I have this old pension from Penwalt back in our San Diego days. I was only there for a few years. It only has like $100,000 or $200,000 in it. I'll just put that towards the down payment. I was like, well, that's fine, but we're in a 2 3/4 rate. What's the rate of return on that investment? How much does that get you in retirement? He was like, probably somewhere between $500 and $800 a month. Not life-changing money, but we did the math. And I was like, well, at 2 3/4%, adding the extra 150, 200,000 in down payment only saves you about $400 a month. So that's bad math. Don't spend $800 to save $400. But it doesn't make any sense, especially knowing that, you look back on it now, I'm sure it's more because I'm sure that market has continued to grow. So it's about looking at the holistic picture and saying, to Harlan's point, what's the finish line we're going for here? And once we know where our finish line is, we now get to draw the game plan to get there while weighing the opportunity costs of how much does it cost you to pull money out of that? We do this all the time in the investing world. And for some reason, when it comes to the emotional state of buying a home, we stop looking at it like an investment and we say, you know what I really like? I like my iPhone. Let's put $700,000 into Apple stock. That's a crazy person's way of investing. No one would do that. You would diversify that $700,000, or you wouldn't dump your life savings into one investment like that. So it's about making sure that your overall wealth is part of the conversation because it's an important investment, often your biggest investment.
Well, and if for the clients that are listening to this, if you are dealing with a financial advisor, if you're dealing with a real estate agent, with a loan officer who does not have these kind of relationships, then you're dealing with nothing more than a transaction person. And that person may be licensed. They may be able to get you a loan. They may be able to invest your stocks. They may be able to write a contract for you to buy a house, but they're not advisors and they're not helpful and you're not getting your money's worth. And that may sound harsh, but I would fire them because anybody can write up, that's licensed, can write up a contract or do a loan for you or invest your money. But what kind of advice are you getting that's going to affect you years from now? It could affect your net worth by some of the decisions I made in my 40s has affected my net worth by over $1 million in my 60s. If I wouldn't have had the right advisors, I would have made the wrong decision. What was that worth? I don't know what I paid them. I mean, I paid Realtors 6% commission. I've paid 100 basis points to a financial advisor, and I've financed my houses with obviously with a loan officer. I don't know what I paid them, but I got a lot better deal than what they got. I made money.
I can attest. Our borrowers get paid. Our borrowers make more on their house than I make on their transaction. I can assure you of that.
Exactly.
So, if working with advisors is so important, why should advisors be engaging with lenders and realtors who do think with this holistic approach? What is the advantage, and what are some of the ways that you would encourage realtors and loan officers to be reaching out to advisors?
Well,
maybe those are three different questions there, so I apologize.
We educate our loan officers internally, but that we also have a CFP credit course for financial advisors of how what we do affects them. And most advisors do not understand that they'll get more from us. They'll get more from realtors than they will the other way around. They sometimes look at us as, oh, you guys are just looking for some referrals. And what we're trying to do is collaborate, not just please send me a referral over, but let's work together with your clients and our clients to put them into a better position. And advisors do not understand that when a decision is made, we just had a client last month that was going to literally pay cash. They had $8 million. They had a lot of money, but they're going to pay $1.2 million in cash for a second home in Florida. That wouldn't have been a fatal mistake. They got plenty of money to make screw ups, but it would have been, we calculated out if they would have paid cash, they would have lost about $1.5 million in net worth over the next 5 years. So,
because what's that opportunity cost? Are you earning more than the 6% on that investment? Then why are we paying off a 6% debt at the expense of an 8% gain?
Well, and it was also a complex tax scenario because they had a buyout from a business, and we could use some of what we were doing as tax write-offs to save them $500,000 in taxes over the next 5 years. So yes, there's all kinds of factors that went together, but because we worked together, that financial advisor had an extra $1 million in AUM and counting, which they get paid on. And that's not why the advisor made that decision together with us. They made it because the client would increase their net worth by over $1 million. So they were doing what was best for the client. They profited too because they had more AUM. We profited because we did a loan, but the client was the biggest winner. But if that advisor would not have worked with us and used our expertise on how we were putting together the financing package so that they did not pull anything out of their investments, that advisor would have lost AUM. The client wouldn't have had as good of an outcome, and they wouldn't have saved nearly as much money in taxes. So advisors are, when they're working with someone that knows what's going on in the financing world, whether it's in the reverse mortgage on our side or forward mortgages on your side, they're going to profit and their clients are going to have a better outcome. And, there's a term in the financing world, and really everybody should act like this, but it's called the fiduciary. And a fiduciary is very simple. You just put somebody else's results, somebody else's needs above your own, which kind of should be basic in the business world. It shouldn't be a law.
Be basic in the human world. Like we should all act as human fiduciaries.
Yes, I'm sure that your wife and my wife would appreciate if we cared more about them than ourselves. So yeah, it works in every human interaction. But as a fiduciary, how can you really be? And I've worked with some people like Jamie Hopkins wrote an article a few years ago about reverse mortgages specifically and said, how can you be a true fiduciary if you don't look at housing wealth in retirement planning? So what the issue is if you're a fiduciary, that means that we as loan officers should specifically look at their whole picture. That means that a real estate agent, even though they're not legally a fiduciary, should look at, well, does this make sense for you to pay cash? Have you looked at other options? Is this really the house you should buy, or does it make more sense to take a look at 3 other houses? and a financial advisor as a fiduciary. Some of them are legally fiduciaries. Some of them are just acting as fiduciaries, but they should look at it and say, hey, what's going on with the housing wealth? Let's get involved in that. Let's talk to the loan officer and finding out what he or she is doing. And let's talk to the real estate agent. And that's going to not only give their clients a better outcome, which is their primary goal, or should be their primary goal, of course. All the good financial advisors that are listening to this, that's a given. Yeah, I care more about my clients. Okay, well then housing wealth bucket 3 should be part of your planning, and consulting with us is going to help you give your client a better outcome. So they should do it for 2 reasons: for their clients and for themselves, both important people.
What are some of the questions that you have on that sheet that you give to the financial advisors or wealth advisors, financial planners to think through housing wealth? And maybe that helps them think through ways that they can integrate a mortgage lender into their annual review processes.
Well, Jason, we start with the cash flow scenario because that's the most important thing. What's going on with what properties do you own? What do you owe? What are the properties worth? And what is your cash flow obligation if you still have a mortgage on it? And is it adjustable, fixed? Is that going to change in the future? Then how long are you going to hold the property? Are you planning on selling this property? Are you planning on moving when your granddaughter graduates from college in the local town? Are you planning on moving to a 55 plus community when you retire? If you're younger, are you planning on doing a move up house as you have a family? So all of those questions, and then begin with the end in mind. When you're older, what's your goal for inheritance? What do you want to give your kids? Do your kids want your house?
Grandkids or whatever.
Yes. Are your grandkids going to move in? What is the long-term goal for your house? Because the only thing we know for sure is that you can't take it with us. So when you die, we're going to be your house.
They don't let you take the money, the house, or any of the other belongings when you go.
That is very true. And so we go all the way to that is, what is your plan for inheritance and estate planning? Because a lot of people don't look at, how does this affect long-term care? Do you want to stay in your house if you get sick?
Mm-hmm.
If your husband dies, or if your husband gets sick, are you going to stay in the house if he has to go to a facility? Or are you going to care for him at home? Those are things that affect my generation more so. But that's usually when people at my age, is when people have a lot of equity in their house. What are you doing now with the equity in your house? And how does that dovetail with long-term care? Because some people say, hey, if I get sick, I want to go to a facility. But the vast majority of people say, I want to age in place. I want to be in my house. Very few people say, I want to spend the last 3 years of my life in a nursing home. And so that is a big deal. Then if that's the case, if you want to stay at home and you want to age in place at home, what kind of house should you have? And how should it fit into your cash flow? So those are all in the 2 pages that we have on the addendum to go through.
If that sounds like something that an advisor wants to start integrating more heavily into their process, you mentioned workshops that we're doing. You and I have a couple that we're trying to schedule soon, where we will go in and speak with advisors. I'll do my free lunch program or breakfast bar, whatever you're in the mood for. And we'll bring some quality content, maybe even a CE if you're interested in it. What are some ways that people can reach out to us to set some of those up?
Well, we always have on the retirement mortgage side, we always have a standard email, reverse@movement.com or 580-REVERSE, where they can call us directly and ask some more questions. But by far the best scenario is simply to reach out to you and schedule a Zoom call and say, what really is going on? It seems like there's something here. You've piqued my interest in this short little podcast. Seems that this may make sense because you guys kind of get it. Let's talk about what you guys do to see whether or not our values align. And that introductory call, I've had many advisors, Jason, that have said, man, that was really worth my time. And they often say, I didn't think that this was going to be very valuable. I just showed up because I was being nice to you, Jason. But
That's what they always tell me. Most of them are the ones that sit on the call are saying they were being nice. The others just say they were all set and never even sit on the call. But it is, in my opinion, it's a good use of my time. I will say I send more referrals to advisors than I do realtors. The stream is a tough one to send stuff up to the realtor. Sometimes it's against the current. But advisors, I mean, every single client I talk to, I ask, do you work with an advisor? I have a client right now. It's sitting on my to-do list. They're going to buy a house and get married. as soon as we get near closing date, the first thing I'm going to do is introduce them to an advisor. They don't have one, and they have some big decisions that are coming up in the next 3 years. They should start talking about it. And so if you're a loan officer out there or a realtor out there that wants to try to think about this more holistically, I encourage you to reach out to us. And I'm always happy to be a resource, and you can pick my brain on ways that you can get in front of more advisors. I know Harlan has shared some really great questions and tips over the past years that have helped me grow my business. For example, doing just that, sitting down and saying, do you work with a wealth advisor? Do you want them to be part of this conversation? How would you rate your wealth advisor or your financial advisor? Uh, if they're not highly rated and not involved in this conversation, or you don't want them to be involved in this conversation, would you like to meet someone who should be part of this conversation? Because they really should. So those are just some of the things that I've picked up from these seminars. And if you're interested, I'd love to invite you to join one, even if it's just to audit the class.
Well, and do you know, Jason, that a lot of realtors complain about financial advisors, and a lot of financial advisors complain about realtors, and of course about loan officers as well. But the fact
We get
is,
stuck in the middle. They both complain about us.
exactly. But the issue is, well, that's because Mr. Financial Advisor, Ms. Financial Advisor, you've never dealt with a realtor that we've educated that understands what's going on. I mean, I just had a realtor on a call the other day, and she was complaining about other realtors that didn't educate themselves. And so there's good realtors and bad realtors, and there's mediocre realtors. That's really worse because you know a bad realtor and you don't deal with them. But mediocre ones, you expect that you're getting help and you're really not. And so good financial advisors want to deal with good loan officers and good realtors. And so I've told a lot of advisors, the reason that you don't like realtors is because you haven't talked to one of those that are trained by us. And then I've told realtors, the reason you don't like working with financial advisors is because you haven't been introduced to the ones that understand your value and understand how important it is that they have a good realtor in their contact list. So that's what we need.
And it can seem like such an adversarial relationship because your advisor, their job is to help grow your assets, right? So someone like me that wants to take all your assets and put them into a house can seem like I'm counterintuitive to being good for your process. The realtor who wants to make the cash offer because that's the one that's going to get accepted, in air quotes, that can seem counterintuitive to working with a loan officer or a wealth advisor. But when working in concert, again, when you work in concert together and you balance that scale of opportunity cost, monthly payment, and competition in terms of getting your offers accepted, it can work really, really well. It turns out people with assets buy homes too, and they still get mortgages.
It's so true. And the biggest winner when we work together is the client. And that's really what we're trying to do in the whole Summit thing. So if you really care about your client as a professional, you need to work together with other professionals is my heartfelt, strong advice. And if you're not doing that, you don't care about your clients. And again, that may sound harsh, but I believe it's true. Thanks for the opportunity, Jason.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Finance with Factor. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Then if you really like us, open another podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or really wherever else you enjoy podcasts. Search Finance with Factor and do it again. The more places you like, share, and follow helps our ratings. But that can be our little secret. Have a question about today's episode or an idea for an upcoming episode? Post a comment. For more content, follow Jason Factor on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Finance with Factor. All content discussed on Finance with Factor is self-published by Jason Factor, Senior Loan Officer, NMLS number 1401985. All rates, guidelines, and advice shared on this episode is subject to change. To contact Jason directly or for a full set of disclosures, visit his website at jasonfactor.com.
Jason Factor, NMLS number 140185. North Point Mortgage supports equal housing opportunity. NMLS number 1515. NMLS Consumer Access Star. Go Factor!